Hello everyone, Path of Exile recently came out with Legion. It came with a lot of changes and other things. Unfortunately, Path of Building on my other computer is broken. I can confirm that through many different ways. So I'm unable to do all the theory crafts that I wanted to. I figured I could just share it as is and go over an older build. The older builds I know will be perfectly fine, even without the calculator. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with that. In my prior recording, I did a Divine Ire Scion Theory Craft. It was intended to be a budget build for brand new players. When I did the build, it was around 20 chaos, which is very cheap. That gives you plenty of room to expand and just do this build as many different ways as you see fit. But yeah, so the passive tree remains the same at the start. We're going through the Sentinel side of Scion, going past Constitution, going into here, getting expertise, going down for barbarism, then coming back up for devotion and this bunch. This area right here is where the build changed. When Legion came out, Singular Focus got moved. It was originally up here, but now it's down here. It is no longer convenient for me to get. The build did take a DPS hit, and I am able to fix that. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Moving on to the other change. Originally I came into Serpent Stance, then went down to get to Agility. From here I went past Elemental Overload and into Lightning Walker. My reasoning for Agility was Lightning Golem. This was one of the summoned golems that I had in the build. You will notice that it takes 68 Dexterity and 98 Intelligence to use it. Agility combined with Expertise gave the build the necessary natural Dexterity to run it. Unfortunately now, that's not an option, due to Light Eater also getting changed. Light Eater used to be down here, but now it's up here. Instead of going into Serpent Stance and going down, I'm going up now to get to Light Eater and eventually to Cruel Preparation. From Cruel Preparation, I then go down into Lightning Walker and the Sponge. It's an unfortunate change, but it's recoverable. You'll notice that I have 1 point left with the change in this build. I always build for level 80. That's when most people tend to stop. So it's really up to you what you want to do with that 1 point. You can start going into the Annihilation Wheel, the Jewel Socket all the way down here. You can start into the Righteous Decree Wheel or the Dynamo Wheel. You have plenty of options here. I would like to point out, though, that this build is critical based. I remember on 6 Link it had somewhere over 50% chance to crit at 4 times damage. So I would probably do the spell Critical Strike chance stuff over here. Dynamo and Righteous Decree really only help if you are trying to use Wave of Conviction. The Jewel slot is universal. It can go into damage or critical, basically doing the same thing as this. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things that depends on you, but that's kind of the thought process in those options. Moving on to items now. The build originally did not use a unique helmet. I have now changed that to use the Broken Crown. My reasoning for the Broken Crown is not only the high armor ES of the helmet, but also because of the high chaos resistance. Remember, this build does use Incandescent Heart. If you do not have a lot of chaos resist, you are going to hurt yourself. With the Broken Crown change, that means you'll have less life, but somewhat more energy shielding. In addition, Broken Crown also brings 10 to 15 dexterity back to the build. You'll still need dexterity in your amulet, and there will be options for that. Your base dexterity is 50. Broken Crown's 10, so it puts you at 60. Essentially, you only need 20 after that point. That means you can use something like Citrine Amulet, or you could use Turquoise Amulet. It all depends on you. Strength just gives you a little bit more health. Intelligence gives you more energy shielding, mana, that kind of thing. That's the beauty of this build. It's so flexible. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the theory crafts that I was unable to do due to the broken calculator now. With the change in the passive tree that now includes this Disciple of the Slaughter, this means frenzy charges now do even more damage than they did prior. To make that even better, there's now more sword nodes right next to it. When I saw that, the first thing I was thinking of was Hyaon's Fury and Oros' Sacrifice. Hyaon's Fury is a unique item that hasn't been used in ages. It is somewhat low on DPS, only achieving about 549.3 at the best. It's still high though for a one-hander. You'll notice that there's very few things in here that even come close to that. But Hyaon's Fury is heavily reliant on frenzy charges, which means that this is perfect for it. Same with these sword nodes over here. There's a couple ways that I can see of doing Hyaon's Fury. One is dual wielding, because of Twin Terrors being right over there. You could go into crit, or you could go into ambidexterity, but Hyaon's Fury, it doesn't have a very good crit chance. It's only 5%. So more than likely that's not going to be the best build. You could probably still pull off damage with Hyaon's Fury. Just go straight damage and frenzy charges. That would more likely be the best scenario. You can do that via dual wielding, or you can do it via one-hander. If you do it dual wielding, just add another Hyaon's Fury to the build. Now, I did notice in the calculator, despite it being broken, that there was a difference between doing it one-handed and dual-wielded. That's because when I was testing it on the calculator, I was doing it with Aegis Aurora. It's one of the few cheap items that causes increased elemental damage with attack skills, which means it does bump up Hyaon's Fury because it's purely lightning. So it is annoying that this does a little bit more than a dual wield Hyaon's Fury. I don't understand it, but whatever. Maybe somebody can figure out how to do it as dual wield, but as far as I'm able to tell, Hyaon's Fury with Aegis Aurora seems to work the best. Now, this is energy shielding, so if you do happen to try doing a theory craft with this, you could pair Hyaon's Fury with Shroud of the Lightless if you happen to make that kind of money in the game. I forgot to pull it up, but Shroud of the Lightless is the energy shield evasion chest piece that has elemental penetration on it, which is great for Hyaon's Fury because of it being, again, lightning damage, and also because there's not a whole lot of intelligence on this side. So if you do go Scion and you happen to drop straight down to here for Disciple of the Slaughter, you'll have all the dexterity you need to run your items, but you won't really find a whole lot of intelligence out here. Strength is manageable on this end because of you having Path of the Warrior to work with and beef down there. That's not including the ascendancies of Scion as well. So there's that. Now let's look at the other build. prior to the calculator completely screwing up, I tried 2 builds using Heavy Strike, Oros Sacrifice and Brain Rattler. It turned out that Oros Sacrifice ended up doing around 10 to 15,000 less DPS than Brain Rattler. A difference between, I think Brain Rattler was sitting at like 220, 225,000 DPS, and Oros Sacrifice was sitting around 210. There is something to note here, though, with the difference in DPS. Oros Sacrifice is pure fire. With Brain Rattler, I had to really work at converting it into lightning damage. Granted, Brain Rattler does have lightning penetration on it, so that does help, whereas this does not. Now, if you do happen to try either Brain Rattler or Oros Sacrifice as Heavy Strike, there's different ways of doing this. We'll start with Oros. Oros gives you frenzy charges, so with Scion you can go into Raider and trigger Onslaught once you reach full frenzy charges. This line here, the same one used for Hyaons, will increase the damage by a lot. And of course you have the same nodes down here as the Nuns Fury Theory craft. This is actually more beneficial than where I was prior. When I got to 210,000 DPS, I was up here buying these nodes. The Arsonist, this wasn't here before. I went here to buy Divine Judgment. Didn't bother with Divine Fury, Divine Wrath because it's adding to physical damage, and Oros is pure fire, so that doesn't help. But eventually I could go into Holy Fire and things like that. That allowed me to do around 210,000 DPS. But if you're going to do it differently, then I would do it with the sword damage nodes, as they will be a lot more universal than those fire nodes that I was working with. As for Brain Rattler, this area is not really going to help it. Brain Rattler is good at doing one thing and one thing only, an absolute crap ton of raw physical damage. As a result of that, I didn't really bother with this bottom part of the tree when I was doing the Brain Rattler build. Instead, I went over here into Bone Breaker, Skull Cracking, and a few of the other stuff up here. Oh yeah, Divine Wrath and Divine Fury is something I did with that due to it gaining physical damage. The only reason that I would have gone down here when I was doing the Brain Rattler build was just for more life nodes. It's far more beneficial to come down here for the life nodes due to this being dexterity. The way I was able to get Brain Rattler up much higher than Oros was because I was running Hatred and Haste. Hatred gives you bonus cold damage based on the physical. That's another reason why I'm saying that these were more universal than the fire nodes. So that's something to keep in mind with that. Now we're going to move on into the staff builds. They've added a ton of stuff here, like one with the river and some other things. Oh, I almost forgot about Galvanic Hammer. That actually works with Brain Rattler. Okay, sorry. Anyways, one with the river and some other things here. Now, one of the neat things with Blunt Trauma up here is it says knock back enemies if you get a critical strike with a staff. There happens to be a staff that does give a chance for a power charge if you knock an enemy back with melee damage, and that's Hegemony Sera. If you wanted to do, say, a Glacial Hammer or Heavy Strike Hegemony Sera, I'm pretty sure you can make that work with the new stuff. Probably more so with Glacial Hammer than Heavy Strike, due to one with the river and all the other stuff being over here. That's something I'll have to see with a calculator when this is not broken. Another option, however, is if you want to go Heavy Strike, there's a staff a little bit more suited to that than Hegemony's Era just means that you won't be working with that particular thing. It is going to be a lower critical chance, but Martyr of Innocence does a crazy amount of fire damage. Now, this happens to be sitting right next to Holy Fire, Explosive Impact, and all the way down here you have Arsonist and Magmatic Strikes. Unfortunately, you'll notice that Martyr does not have a very high base physical damage. That means Divine Wrath and Divine Fury won't really do much to it, same with Magmatic Strikes. Arsonist would, though. The top half of this would, because Arsonist is just straight fire damage. And then, of course, all this over here is just universal. That's just critical strikes and block chance and all that. So that's very universal with really any staff build. It's just this that's not really universal, because one with the river says increase elemental damage with staves. That means you will need to be running Martyr with Heavy Strike or Hegemony's Arrow with Glacial Hammer to really be seeing this. Yeah, so there's a lot here to consider, but hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of where I was going. Maybe somebody who's a lot better at theory crafting than me can find a way to make something work out of what I just mentioned. If you do, please give me credit. I do not have a lot of time these days, but I really do enjoy theory crafting and I want to share it with you all. So I'm hoping that you all can recognize the work I'm putting in. Anyways, that's the most I have. Thanks for listening.